Hello folks, a couple of weeks after every new World of Warcraft patch, I like to do a bit of a review of it and take a look at what worked, what didn't, and how I think the patch landed. And it's now time to give patch 11.27 that treatment. As always, I'll be starting out by taking a look at the new storyline campaign. The campaign follows the pattern established with Dragonflight, where the final patch storyline acts as a prologue and setup for the next expansion. This story sees us catch up with Aratar, the son of Illyria and Turalyon, now a paladin himself, who asks us to catch up with his aunt and Illyria's sister, Varisa Windrunner, who is experiencing visions, which are quickly revealed as being a vicious void attack on Silvermoon. This prompts Aratar to seek to recruit the other Windrunner sisters to join Varisa in preparing for what is to come. First off, we visit Koresh, where we find Illyria still obsessively trying to track down Xal'atath, helping her question a void minion. But despite Aratar's efforts, he's not able to convince her to return, with Illyria citing the risk she poses to the Sunwell. More on that shortly. However, we do manage to recruit the Void Elves, with Magister Umbric promising to answer any call when it comes. Next, and it's off to find Sylvanas, who is still down doing dailies in the Maw. And who better than Venari to help us find a sneaky way to reopen access to the Shadowlands. Now, bringing Sylvanas back into the story is a pretty gutsy move by the Blizzard developers, but it's one that I have to say was very well done, with Sylvanas, even as she helps lost souls, remaining at her cutting and icy best. Aratar's attempts to recruit her to his cause, though, are to no avail, with Sylvanas being fully committed to her duties in the Maw. But she does take time to take us aside and drop a bit of a lore bomb. It seems that Sylvanas is not convinced that the Shadowlands is the true realms of death, very heavily hinting at possible Titan involvement in their creation. After a rather fruitless and pointless mission, we see a cutscene where Illyria catches up with Xal'atath, only to see her using the power of her dark heart to open a portal, which those of us who have seen the Midnight expansion reveal cinematic will naturally realise is probably a portal to Silvermoon. Overall, while Aratar's mission turned out to be a bit pointless, I found the story to be pretty decent, with it doing a really good job of introducing newer players to Aratar and Varisa, and the Sylvanas encounter was very well handled. But at the same time, I did find the fate of the Dark Heart to be kinda strange. The War Within story has been all about Xal'atath powering up the Dark Heart for an as yet unknown goal, and discovering that that goal is to open a portal, presumably to Silvermoon, is a bit anticlimactic, when Xal'atath's been zipping in and out of Azeroth for the entire expansion. Now, I assume the explanation for that is that she needed a lot more power to link her realm to Azeroth and allow her to bring her full forces through. But even so, that really wasn't shown in the cinematic. And if you're not thinking deeper into the bigger picture, I think you're left kinda wondering, why on earth does Xal'atath need a portal? Anyway, moving on from any logical inconsistencies in the campaign, and we also got a brand new Lorewalking story which focuses on the Blood Elves, offering us a retelling of the Scourge's attack and kill Thalas from Warcraft 3, along with the restoration of the Sunwell by Velen, and for non-Void Elf players, an opportunity to witness Illyria accidentally almost corrupting the Sunwell. Now, I've been a fan of the Lorewalking concept ever since it was released as a way to help players catch up on core story elements, and this particular episode really did deliver. And thankfully, while there were a couple of minor glitches, I didn't encounter any of the type of game-breaking bugs that I did when I did the original 3 Lorewalking stories. Now, while that was it, story-wise for existing players, for new and leveling players, we also saw the introduction of a completely revamped new player experience. The experience still begins in Exile's Reach, which has also received a mild revamp, with the addition of Rathian, Caligos, and either Jaina Proudmoore or Thrall, depending on your faction. Overall, the underlying story of Exile's Reach is mostly unchanged. Instead of a necromantic ritual, it's now a void ritual, and we have to rescue Rathian or Kaligos, but otherwise, it'll feel pretty familiar to existing players. I personally have some very mixed feelings about this update. Neither Jaina nor Thrall really do much at all other than stand around waving their arms, and at no point in the storyline does it show to a new player our dragon friends shape-shifting between their humanoid and dragon forms. This latter omission means that it is very easy for a new player who is not deeply studying the experience to completely miss that the Rathian and Kaligos they encounter on the islands are the same dragons that we see flying alongside the ship. And in fact, in my view, all of the big name characters really kind of feel like extras rather than core protagonists in the story. Overall, I feel that the storyline could have benefited massively from a much greater focus on Rathian and Kaligos, with Jaina and Thrall being omitted entirely. Rathian could very easily have fulfilled the role that Jaina and Thrall were trying to fulfill, as well as their own role in the story. That said, at the end of the storyline, instead of being sent on to the confusing, for new players, quest soup of Stormwind or Orgrimmar, Kaligos now flies us straight to the Dragon Isles, and I do think that this is a major improvement. As a regular of newcomer chat in-game, I very often saw new and returning players getting completely confused and sidetracked by Stormwind when they passed through it. And now that the new player is on the Dragon Isles, the changes continue, with a much greater focus on doing the Dragonflight campaign. And this is not just limited to the original 4 zones. Upon completing the Thuldraza storyline, we're now sent into a new story mode version of the Razageth encounter, and then it's off to Zaralek Caverns and through all of the max level campaign. Once the character reaches level 70, as always, it is off to Castle Gar, but the final 10 levels have been massively accelerated with 80% reductions in the XP that's required to level up. While that reduction sounds kinda nuts, it is basically just bringing the 70 to 80 leveling speed into line with the lower levels, essentially getting it ready for midnight. To accommodate this massive increase in speed, the War Within story has a new recap mode, with a massively accelerated Lorewalking style retake of the War Within's story. It starts off with a very condensed editing together of multiple cinematics, and ultimately ends with a story mode visit to Dimensius. But weirdly, none of the other major raid bosses get a visit during the experience. Overall, I like what the developers have done in principle, but compared to Dragonflight, the War Within storyline felt insanely rushed. And it's weird to me that Dragonflight is getting the bulk of the level up time, instead of the War Within, which is, after all, the first episode of the 3-part saga that Midnight is also a part of. In my personal opinion, I think it would have been far better narrative-wise to spread the War Within storyline over a lot more levels. Perhaps having Dragonflight be levels 10 to 30 using the recap feature, followed by the War Within over levels 30 to 70. Obviously, that would have massively changed the leveling bands and might have felt weird to existing players, but the Blizzard dev team do have the technology to pull something like that off, and I think it would have done a much better job of setting up new players for Midnight. And it's not just new players that we're seeing some love. For returning players, there is also a very brief brand new storyline set in the Arathi Highlands. This lasts about 30 minutes and is mainly aimed at offering a chance for returning players to get used to their characters and how they've changed, before at the end of this new experience we're offered a direct portal to some level appropriate content to do. Now, this is also a great idea from the developers. Ever since the Shadowlands leveling revamp, returning players have tended to be dumped midway through the modern leveling process, but in a location that often wasn't suitable for their character's level, meaning that they'd have to somehow figure out unfamiliar new game technologies like chromie time. The end result, from what I saw from newcomer chat, was that such older hands would very often end up fighting the game as they tried to follow familiar but very out-of-date leveling paths, something which ended up giving them, in my view, a very misleading impression of how the game works in the modern era. Unfortunately though, while a very good idea, the execution of the returning player experience, at least in week 1, left a lot to be desired. When I ran through it, every single quest, with one lone exception, was completely broken. I would pick up the quest only for it to disappear. No sign of it on the quest giver or the quest log, forcing me to log in and out again repeatedly in order to get the quest to show up. This made running through the experience incredibly painful, and it took about 3 times longer than the 30 minutes it should have. Now put yourself in the shoes of a returning player who's wondering if World of Warcraft is worth giving another try, but is maybe having some doubts. Imagine logging in and encountering what must have felt like a completely broken and unplayable game. Would you have powered through that experience and continued your sub? I know that personally I wouldn't. In my personal opinion, releasing a returning player experience in this state was an act of self-sabotage on the part of the developers. It is completely inconceivable to me that this issue wasn't noticed during testing, assuming of course that they bothered to try and test it. And it sends out a terrible message about the World of Warcraft development team's attitude to their players. Long-term existing players like me are often willing to push past things like this, but first impressions are critically important in video games. And in my view, new and returning players encountering something like that simply will just Alt F4 and not come back. And as one of those long-term players, I very much understand that recruiting both new and returning players is critically important to the long-term health of the game. So seeing something like this generally pains my soul. Anyways, moving on from that particular rant, biggest feature of the patch was of course player housing's early access, and that experience could not have been more different to that returning player experience. Now, it is worth, I think, acknowledging that the day one experience, especially at peak time, was a little bit shaky, with the public neighbourhood finder having some loading issues and guilds getting errors when they tried to create their neighbourhoods. But given the massive scale of the player housing feature, there were always going to be some hiccups, especially as the full mass of the player base tried to get their first home all at the same time. And the biggest surprise here was that the issues we encountered were limited to just those hiccups. Once you did manage to get a house, the experience was absolutely flawless. No lag, no crashes, no broken homes, just plain sailing all the way. Put simply, World of Warcraft now has the best version of player housing that exists in any MMO, and the second place holder really isn't even close. No matter if you are a 3D modelling veteran or, like me, a complete novice with absolutely no art skills, the new player housing's user interface made customizing our home and its interior a breeze, and the combination of a housing decor starter pack, rewards from legacy achievements, and a comprehensive collection of decor and vendors near our homes enabled me to set up a satisfying first attempt with very little difficulty at all. Now, of course, as with everything, there are always areas where things could be improved. For many players, the understandable exterior decoration limits are far too low, and I'm hoping that the dev team do find ways to overcome any technical limitations over time and are able to raise those limits. Overall though, for me, player housing has been a massive success, and I'm excited to see what options the dev team plan to add to the feature throughout Midnight. Now, if player housing wasn't for you, there were some more standard gameplay options to get our teeth into as well. First up was Shadowlands Timewalking. Now, there's not a lot to say about this, as Timewalking has been a very popular feature of World of Warcraft for many years now, and the addition of Shadowlands simply expands on that successful format. Albeit, I do think that we are very long overdue another new Timewalking raid, as the last raid to be added, Firelands, dates back from Battle for Azeroth. Sadly though, Timewalking has been another area where we've experienced some quality control issues. On week 1, I zoned into an instance of the other side where the final boss failed to become attackable. And for the last 2 weeks in a row, the Timewalking vendors have been broken for the first 24 to 48 hours. Now, of course, Blizzard likes their time gating, and so we had to wait another week for the final 2 pieces of patch content to become available. The first of those being the final phase of Legion Remix, which offers an increased item level cap and accelerated progression, along with significantly increased bronze drops, albeit that latter did require a hotfix after player feedback. I do think that combining catch up with expanded progression has done a decent job of extending the life of Legion Remix for its fans, albeit I was very surprised that there were no new cosmetic rewards launching with this phase. New rewards were one of the promised features of Phase 5 back when it was announced, and this was still being included in Blizzard's publicity even the week of the launch of the phase. Looking more broadly at Legion Remix, for me it was great to return to the first World of Warcraft expansion that I ever played. For Remix, I personally don't go into the endgame side. I really don't want to have to juggle 2 sets of MMO endgames, but I do enjoy the opportunity to redo the expansion storylines, and I very much appreciated that I was able to get all of the mount rewards that I wanted in one character just by going through that story. More broadly, the community response to Legion Remix has been broadly very positive, albeit I do get a sense that participation has probably been a bit less than it was with Mock Remix. And the big question for me is, where does Remix go next? As there really aren't any other slam dunk choices out there other than perhaps BFA. Now, if Legion Remix isn't your thing, we also got the return of what is probably one of the most requested returning features ever, the Brawler's Guild. I first did the Brawler's Guild in Battle for Azeroth, and I had a great experience with it, so I was very much looking forwards to this. Compared to the Delve solo challenge bosses, the Brawler's Guild solo encounters are quick, bite-sized and super well tuned for my character's level. And while queuing with other players for my shot in the arena can be a bit annoying if that queue is very long, it does create a social feel, and for me, watching other players do their stuff while I waited was part of the fun. My main criticism with its return though is that we only got 4 new bosses out of 28 progression encounters, and I was also disappointed that we did not see another Battle for Azeroth style questline. That questline in BFA was a big part of the Brawler's Guild success for me, adding depth and giving us a reason to explore more of the guild's features, such as the multiplayer option that is otherwise very rarely used, and I do think that not having that was a bit of a miss on the part of the developers. Don't get me wrong, I still had a lot of fun, but this return nevertheless has felt a little bit like a regression on the past examples, and I do think that it could have benefited from a much more in-depth update. For the last couple of expansions, whenever the developers have been asked about the Brawler's Guild, the response has always been to say that they did want to bring it back, but in a much more evergreen format. And this applies to me that unlike past outings, this time around the Brawler's Guild will not just get removed at the end of the expansion. The big question that raises for me is, will it get even more updates, ideally a much deeper update in Midnight, or is it going to suffer a similar fate as the return of the Mage Tower, which is to be left as it is now for new and returning players and the odd nostalgia trip? While that particular fate did make sense for the Mage Tower, I do think that it would be a terrible shame if the Brawler's Guild suffers the same outcome, and so I hope that adding more to the guild is already on the dev team's 2026 roadmap. Looking at the patch overall and taking into account that it is the final patch of the expansion, I was pleasantly surprised by the breadth of content that we got, even excluding player housing, which is kind of a one-off special sauce. For someone like me who wants to play right through to the bitter end of an expansion, I've been pretty happy with it, and I'm looking forwards to wrapping up on the remaining rewards that I still have to chase. That said, it is really disappointing to see the quality issues that we have sadly become accustomed to through Dragonflight and the War Within starting to creep into content aimed at new or returning players. This is an area where you really need to put your best foot forward, and quite simply, the returning player experience on day one didn't achieve that. Things like Plunderstorm and now Player Housing clearly demonstrate that the dev team is capable of pulling off near flawless releases of even complex and technically challenging features when they put their mind to it, which just makes the quality misses in that returning player experience much harder for me to understand. Anyways, that's it for my review of patch 11.2.7. This coming Saturday, I will be doing my now traditional review of the year in World of Warcraft, and given where we are, I'm planning to extend that to do a full review of the War Within's expansions, and hopefully I will see you all for that. In the meantime, I'd love to hear what you think of the new patch. Have you been enjoying the Brawlers Guild, or are you just glad that Remix is almost done? Comment down below. If you found this update helpful, entertaining, or even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos, along with my other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My links in the description below as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.